Hello and welcome to What's Not Working, our first webinar short of 2023, which will share some lessons we learned in 2022 that might make this year a bit easier and saner. My name is Ashley Nelson. I'm the Director of Communications here at the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. For those of you just joining us for the first time, the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience, ICSC, or the Coalition for short, is the only global network of historic sites, museums, and memory initiatives that connect past struggles to today's movements for human rights and social justice. You can move the slide forward, please. Founded in 1999, we now have over 350 members in 65 countries, from Ellis Island in New York City to former centers of detainment in Argentina, to sites that remember and learn from the transatlantic slave trade in West Africa. While our members focus on a range of subjects, what connects them is their belief that history should be used as a transformative tool for positive change. At Sites of Conscience, memory is considered to be the best weapon civil society has against injustice. By remembering the world's most challenging periods and giving voice to those who have been historically silenced, Sites of Conscience seek justice for harms done so that peaceful futures may take root. For more information on how to join, please visit our website. Moderating our conversation today is Braden Paynter, our Director of Methodology and Practice. As many of you already know, he has trained hundreds of organizations in dialogue, community engagement, planning, and operating at the intersection of history and justice. Before joining the coalition, Braden worked at the National Park Service at the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, where he oversaw public education, professional development programs, and in exhibits at Old Sturbridge Village. I'll hand it over to Braden now. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for spending some time hanging out today. As we get going, one of the things it would be lovely if folks did is use the Q&A section there of the webinar to introduce yourselves to everybody else who's here, and just say hi, let everybody know your name, where you're coming from, and what was on your mind that brought you here today. So go ahead and start doing that. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's not working, and in particular, we're going to talk today about failure. The list of things that we could talk about that didn't work in 2022 is longer than 30 minutes. That's okay. What we want to think about is something we see from organization to organization as we work with folks around the world, is the ability to work with failure is a really critical skill. It's also something that we don't talk about a ton as organizations, and it's more than a 30-minute conversation. So we're just going to introduce a little bit of language, a little bit of thinking, and maybe one framework today to help you start to think about what failure means for your organizations and how it can be a really productive thing, right? So that we can take what's not working and turn it into what will work. I will 100% be asking you to think about a failure from this last year, or something that's not working in your own life. Just not yet. We'll get there in a minute, but just to prep you to have that going in your head. But I'll start with one of mine. Before we go any further, before we jump into any ideas, we often work in fields where we are only supposed to talk about success when we're on social media, when we're at professional conferences, when we're in any place. The images that we're supposed to present are ones of success only. And so just to start to counter that, let me tell you about one thing that didn't work last year. We had a pretty large project with a state park system, and it was a pilot project. It was a system that we've worked with for 6 or 7 years. It was a relationship that really mattered to us. It was the biggest project we'd done with them to date, trying to help tell more inclusive stories at a range of sites across the system. We really wanted to get this one right. We had lots of phone calls. We did surveys. We brought in partners who were subject experts. And when we got to the actual work with sites, I don't know if I have been in a colder room than some of those rooms, right? Except for the folks who got real mad at a couple of moments. Right? It didn't go always the way that we wanted it to. And I felt like a failure at moments because I had these lofty dreams for what we were going to accomplish. And I wanted people to be chatty and happy and nice with each other. And I worried what our partners would think. And I'd worry what the friends that I'd brought onto the project would think. And at the end of it, when we step back from it all, it both was as bad and it wasn't as bad as all of that sounds, right? For sure, there were some folks that we didn't reach in the ways that we wanted to. Absolutely. We didn't have every impact that we wanted to have. And some funny things happened out of it. One, because we had talked about what it meant to be a pilot project and what it meant to try, and our partners were so excited to experiment, we've actually decided to expand what we're doing next year. And we've got a whole set of new ideas, many of which are not going to work as well, but that we've enlisted everybody in actively learning throughout this and actively experimenting. And it's meant that when we have things that don't go the way we expect, we've been able to make productive impacts. And our evaluator said, actually, you did have all these positive impacts. So evaluators are nice too, to get outside of the voices in our heads. So we're gonna look at this, right? So just to say that I think the first thing for our field as a whole is being willing to say our projects don't always go the way we want. We don't always meet our expectations. We don't have the impacts we want. And that's a cultural change that I think would be beneficial for the field as a whole. I want to share just two other kind of thoughts or myths about failure as we jump into this. I want to share one framing, and then I'm going to give you, let you think a little bit on your own with that framework. Thanks to the folks who have said hi in the Q&A so far. It's awesome to see some of our longtime friends on here, and also some new people jumping on. If you haven't said hi yet, please do so in many ways, because this is going to be relationships and friendships and networks are part of how we take things that don't go right and make them into things that do. All right, so let's look at just two quick myths of failure. Would we flip the next slide? And speaking of things that may or may not work, we're going to work with a little bee analogy here. Mostly this is because I'm in Maine. It's been snowing for like a week, and I wanted to look at pictures of flowers on the webinar today. So we're thinking about bees right now and what they can tell us about failure. One is that failure is not a binary. We often think about projects, they're either successes or failures. That there's, but just like everything else, there needs to be a gradient. Right? So this bee has a set of binary colors on its backs, these alternating stripes, but failure is often a little bit more mixed, right? And kind of like that, it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that, it's a little yellow, it's a little black. And trying to start to break out of the idea that things are either successes or failures, and not trying to live in binaries and start to really think in more spectrums is a really helpful way. And I'll show you a spectrum in just a second for thinking about that. Second slide. So the second idea is that failures are not always bad. We pretty closely link that idea of failure is bad. We don't want to fail. And there are certainly moments and there are certainly aspects of projects that we really don't want to fail on. And here's the bee analogy again, right? Bees can sting us. That's the thing that we don't want for sure. And also bees are critical pollinators, right? They're part of what helps make us grow. And so if we're so concerned about the stings that bees give us that we tried to get rid of them entirely, overall, we would have fewer beautiful things in the world. And failure is very much the same way. If we spend all of our time trying to not be stung, we're going to overall lose a lot of growth. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what on any project the zone of productive discomfort is. And we think about productive discomfort if it is that zone right in the middle where we can try things, we can have some success, we can have some failure, some things go right, some things go in unexpected ways, and we're able to learn and adapt from it. If we're too far outside of our zone of comfort, right, and it can become unproductive, that things we're trying to do are so far outside of our skill zone. There's we're not able to adapt, we're not able to make corrections. It's really hard for us to learn from it because we've pushed ourselves too far. Similarly, if we stay too comfortable, we're never going to have the experiences where we push the edges of what we know, we try new things. And so really thinking about that sort of zone of productive discomfort. And that if we don't have things that don't go well, it means we're probably not pushing as much as we should be, and we're missing the opportunities to try and grow. And that's for all of our cultural organizations, that's critical. Linda, my colleague, was like, I have a quote about this that I love. She said, she heard somebody, it was a business person, but said, reward success and failure, but punish inaction was one idea. Okay, so there's the bee analogies, right? Don't worry about getting, let's not try and be so worried about being stung that we don't do some pollinating, and let's not think in binaries. Okay, and so a way of looking at that, there's a wonderful resource actually, if you want to start to bring this back to your organization and start having a conversation about failure, is from the folks at the Failspace Project. And they have this wonderful little wheel. It's one of their resources on their website. They've got a ton of free stuff there. They're out of the UK. They're thinking more about arts projects, but I think they work really well across the cultural sphere. And so they say that it's really helpful to start to break down a project into these 5 categories when we start to think about what kinds of successes and failures we've had. Participation, who was involved and what were the relationships, the purpose, what are the big goals and did we meet them? The profile is how much it was received by others, what it means for the reputation of everybody involved. Process is how did it actually go in the doing, and what was the intention of what we did, and the practice is was the thing that was created, was it actually effective? Did it actually start to meet the goals? And they also then try and think about things on a spectrum from outright success, resilient success, conflicted success, tolerable failure, precarious failure, and outright failure, right? So from wild success to wild failure. And it starts to be helpful to sit down and start to say, cool, I'm thinking about this thing. Maybe I'm not thrilled with how it went, but how did actually that affect the relationships? Did the relationships work in this? Oh, cool. Those were actually pretty successful. Was it that the practice didn't work? Was it that our profile didn't work in some ways? Was it that the purpose wasn't really met? When I think about that state parks project that I mentioned, right, the purpose, we didn't hit the purpose, right? But the relationships, that participation actually was pretty good. We messed up the process for sure. But ultimately the profile worked out, right? The way that people think about wanting to do this work stayed strong, and there's really strong interest in moving it forward. Right? So it helps us start to figure out, okay, where was this? And then what changes do we want to make? Okay, so this is the moment where you're going to have some quiet, reflective time. We won't have to do this publicly quite yet, but I want to give you actually like 5 minutes. If we go back there, yeah, to do 5 minutes and just think about a project from the last year and spend some time filling in your own little circle. How would you start to parse this out for yourself? So I'm going to turn my camera off to give you those 5 minutes, and we'll come back together to chat in the chat box a little bit about what you learned, what you noticed, and what it means for you thinking about going forward. just to interrupt, I see a bunch of folks are saying, oh, I'm having trouble seeing participants. We're sorry that Zoom is not cooperating super well today to see that, because that's always one of our favorite parts of this. So we can, sorry, apologies about that. Oh, great. Ren is asking for clarification about each of those again. I went through it really quick. I can drop the original document in there that has notes for, that has everyone. This is failures all around. I totally forgot to do that. I meant to. Really quickly, participation is about who was involved and what the relationships were. Purpose is about who is about what the big goals were and if we met those. Profile is how was it received by others and what the sort of relationship impact was. Process is how it was done. Did we like the way we created things? And the practice is the thing itself. Was it effective? Right. So I'll drop a little doc in there and you can hear from them, their own words. All right, maybe one more moment. Okay, coming back. I think we've got the chat function working again. Thanks to folks at the coalition for making that happen. And hopefully that's easier for everybody to use. In the chat box, would anybody be willing to share? What was it that as you started to try to break out a project that had failures in a couple of different ways, and start to also put it on a spectrum, not a hard yes or no, but right? This kind of set of gradients. What stood out to you about that experience? What did you start to realize? What did it change for you as you started to look at things that way? Give folks a moment to write in the chat. Mm, Lisa, nice to see your name again. And what a great idea that, right, the level of risk someone is willing to take may influence where they see their success. Yeah, that's huge. And sometimes for people, it can be helping them take more risks is about figuring out which one of these is actually the thing that people are really concerned about. Right? Is it about a relationship? Is it about the actual product? Is it about the goals? Right? Where is it that somebody's really concerned or feels most risk averse? So it can also help us start to talk through that. Yeah. I love it, Whitney. Right? Realizing that actually that wasn't as bad as I thought, right? That I had more success than I realized. And maybe that gives us the confidence to try to keep exploring. Mm. Looking at failure helps us also identify strengths from Kristen. Yeah. And thinking about what can be improved gives a roadmap. Absolutely. And I think one of the things in here, as we keep saying this, that we're realizing that a lot of this is perception, is that one of the other ways that success and failure are not binaries is because it becomes interesting in here to ask the question of who, right? Success for who and failure for who. And we realize that when we ask that, oh, who was this a success for? Who would we say that? We might actually have multiple wheels for one project because you realize, oh, the purpose, actually, we did have a really successful outcome for some of the people involved, right? So for some people, they would look at this and say it was the greatest thing ever. Maybe you've had this experience when you're like, why did they just cancel my favorite television show? I thought it was the greatest ever, right? It was meeting all of your goals. It wasn't meeting somebody else's goals. And so that this whole perception is just that. And so as we think about what happens inside of an organization, right, there's lots of specific lessons that we could have done throughout this of like, oh, let's use our social media this way. Let's try and stop doing that behavior. But there's this root core ability to be able to talk about failure. And one of the core parts of that is starting to give ourselves the language and recognize that just like every one of our other concepts, it is in many ways socially determined. And so we're going to try and work through it in all the same ways that we think about all the other big, scary ideas and words that we have to work through as a group. Yeah. Yeah, right. And Liz starting to think about what's the difference between that organizational work unit, individual tolerance. Yeah, like starting to move this up. Okay, what is it? Because organizations have risk tolerances and organizations have conceptions of failure that might be different than an individual's. And so what becomes part of a work culture in a space is something to change. And that's actually a place, again, just to throw out these fail space folks who I think are doing a nice job thinking about this. I'm realizing the slide cut off just a little bit of the intro there, but for their title, but they've got some good materials. And if you ever want to think about how to talk about this with a staff, one of the flip sides of this is that we also think about creativity a lot and what it means to build creativity in an organization. And that's something, again, Linda has done a lot of thinking about. Okay, last prompt for the day, just to think about. And this is, again, trying to bring a different lens to failure is there something from the last year that you are grateful that you failed at, and not just a COVID test, right? There's things we know we want to fail at. Hey, I got a negative COVID test. Great. But is there something from the last year that you're really grateful that you failed at? This can be a big one. It can be a little hard to think about. Luz, you have your hand up. Did you have a thought, something you wanted to share verbally? Okay, that's all right. Right. Well, just think about that, right? This can be a takeaway. This is a big enough question that I'm actually not surprised we don't have answers right away. Nice. Lori being able to showcase growth mindset in the training room. Yeah. Right. Sometimes it's really easy for me to think about this in non-work contexts. Right? We went climbing the other day in the winter, and it was just the snow was deeper and the weather was harder, and we did not reach the summit that we were aiming for. And we turned around and everyone got down safely. And I'm really glad that we failed at it, because it also meant that we picked a goal that was suitably challenging, that was really pushing us to our limits. And so in that context, it was really great. As I think about some of these other, the work with the state park system, I'm glad we took that on, right? We were looking at colonization, and we were looking at some of the things that had challenged that organization for the better part of 100 years. And so it meant that we were putting ourselves aimed at the appropriate size of a challenge. And we're going to have more chances to try and change that going forward. So think about moments that you're grateful to fail. And I think that might also help to continue to open up this conversation as well. Oh, interesting, Ren. I'm grateful a friendship failed. Oh, wow. That is, I am sure, a long cup of coffee to hear more about that. Really nice. Okay, so takeaway thought there, takeaway idea. Big picture, if you want to connect to anybody else from the call today, let us know. There's amazing people on this, and many of you I would love to see again in person or online. And as you're thinking about what you want to try, what you want to take on, be in touch with us. Let us know. We love to help people think through all of these pieces as we go along. Ashley, thanks for letting me come by today. I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Braden, as always, and thank you everyone for your great participation. I just wanted to remind you that every month we have 2 webinars. One, a short one, as this one was, that's kind of designed to give more practical tools, and then a longer one that delves into an issue relating to a contemporary issue that sites of conscience may have to tackle. In February, we will be looking at what museums can do to improve dialogue about gun control. So we will have a member from our organization Pulse in Orlando, Florida, and a couple other folks as well. So we hope you join us. I also would love if I could just have you take a little poll. It really helps us. I'm going to put it up there. It's completely anonymous. If you have a moment to just fill it out, we would be very grateful. It helps us evaluate our programming and decide what topics and formats work best for you in the future. So if you have a few minutes, we'd be so grateful. We'll leave it open for a few minutes, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye, everyone.